I'm blowing this steamer. This ain't what you want, boy. Lil Durk single. I'm stacking chips, no Pringles. All blues, no singles. Name ringing bells, all winter, no jingle. Internet shooter, yeah, you roll with your fingers. UNC dunk, stepping cold, no freezer. Top shelf, big.
Hey yo, what's good with everybody, man? I hope everybody's having a productive day, feeling blessed, and like I always say, it's one life, one chance. We only got one chance to do this right. Let's get it done. With that being said, man, I'm gonna answer a question from a subscriber. I think it's a very important one. I think it's an interesting one, and as I was going over it in my head and jotting down my notes, I came across some crazy little information that I can run across to you guys, and it makes for a good story and for great content. And I hope you guys enjoy it. Let me know what you guys think. I want you guys to tell me your guys' experiences too, as well as if you guys been in the same predicament that I was in and how you guys viewed us in the sense that we viewed you guys as well. So with that being said, man, hit the subscribe button, hit the like, always leave a comment, always share your opinion and your viewpoints so we can all learn from one another and grow as a community and as a YouTube channel as well. Not to mention, I also heard that I've been called out on YouTube by Gunnerz Collective on this prison spread. So guess what? Challenge accepted. I ain't did what in a minute. About to put on my kitchen apron. Like Sibo said, I'm in the kitchen cooking bacon with my bulletproof apron. Let's get it done, homeboy. Don't forget, man, I got a white girl who went to culinary schools, bro. So she gonna be my team member, bro. We gonna cook up a little something in the stew, bro, in the kitchen. Let's go. So let's get into it. He asked me pretty much as a northerner, what was it like programming with southerners on the yard, on the main lines, the things that we look for, what were their strong points and their weak points, as well as whites and mixing with other races as well. Here's what I can elaborate on. Growing up on the streets of, Tulare County, and a lot of the homies from the Bay Area can validate the same thing. We had Surenos, within our atmosphere, but we didn't know how to interact with them. All we knew was just, funk on site, like 14 Caliber said. It was funk on site. We just beefed. We didn't know how to talk to them. We didn't know their approach. But when you get to prison and the homies begin to teach you the art of communication when it comes to coexisting with your fellow oppositions, because as much as, we're going to have that level of respect and understanding, we're going to consider one another opposition. And being labeled an oppositional force, you got to take that real serious, bro, because as much as we're willing to go to war for what we fight for and what we believe in, they are as well. The difference is we're always going to be outnumbered by Surenos, bro. That faction, it's going to grow. They continuously grow. The LA, this down south, is much bigger than up north. And I never understood that. I mean, I like to say that Northern California and Southern California all have big cities, but... And, we got different barrios, a lot of neighborhoods, big neighborhoods. But I never understood why Northerners weren't a big population when it comes to the penal system. I guess you could say a lot of the Northerners don't get caught or choose not to go gangbanging the lifestyle to that extent, to that extreme, because you'll meet a Southerner in prison, especially on the level 4 180s. 75–80% of them in there and do them 15 to life, 25 to life for attempted murders on different barrios. So they're out there putting work on each other in record numbers and ending up in the penal system with record numbers, 150, 200 deep at all times, bro. Their numbers are never small. But as a northerner, we're trained to always and closely monitor, the southern faction. Obviously, they have the alliance with the whites. We do monitor the whites as well in the same sense, but we teach in jail, to the 3 A's, awake, aware, alert. So we had to be alert. We always had to pinpoint and monitor what the Surenos are doing from the moment you wake up. We have individuals every day on the tier assigned specifically to take notes of everything they see every day. They're called daily tier reports, DTRs. Those daily tier reports, I'm going to wake up, and if I see a Southerner going to medical, I'm going to write it down. What time he left, what time he came back, what cell door did he stop at, did he drop anything off from the yard. If I see Surenos on the tiers and I see him whispering through the door and they're talking and look serious, I'm going to monitor it down. I'm going to write it down. I'm going to monitor what cell door he goes next. If there's Surenos that were porters, I'm going to monitor what cells do they stop at on a frequent basis, so I can identify if these particular cells are influential cells. Are they channels? Are these Surenos or camaradas, or are they individuals that might be in possession of weapons, or is this cell might be the individual. You know, I'm going to monitor this cell because what if that individual is going to visit on a consistent basis and all of a sudden there's drugs in the pod, there's drugs in the building. I'm going to assume that's their hitter right there. But I'm going to find out their pipeline, their source of interest, their money, their drugs. That's what those daily tier reports, everybody has to do it when it comes to Northerners. And we all submit them to the tier channel. The tier channel generates a report consisting of the most vital information from all these reports, consolidates them, sends them to the block channel. The block channel is going to filter them out. By the time it gets to somebody like me or Marcelli in high ranking positions, we're going to try to pinpoint who are the main factors in our building and on the yard. That's what we do as Northerners. So, of course, we got to identify their strong points. We're going to study their workouts, and we're going to compare it to ours. Because if their workouts seem to be strong and their homies are actually getting buff, getting built, being physically in shape, we're going to do twice as much as that now. Now we're going to do 500 burpees with 500 push-ups right afterwards. Then I'm going to do some jumping jacks to build my win because my fight's going to be 2-3 times harder than theirs. Remember, they're going to jump me. They're going to overwhelm me. So I got to be able and have the ability and the body language and the physical strength to take on 2 or 3 people at a time. That's our war mentality when we're in the cell. That's our war preparation and the mindset that we need to have at all times, that we're going to be outnumbered. So we need to learn to fight 3 times as hard. So yeah, we monitor their behavior. You can just tell when a certain individual is carrying a weapon or not. He's limited to his ability to what he can and can't do. An individual who's carrying a knife in his pocket is not going to be out there doing burpees. He's just going to be standing around. If a guy's doing burpees and he's doing his kicks and he's doing exercises, that's a possibility of him dropping that weapon on accident and identifying himself as being a weapon holder. And now we're going to target this individual, so he ain't going to have one on him. He might have it rolled up in his little towel next to him right there where he's working out at, or probably tucked in his shoe or tucked somewhere close by him, but it ain't going to be on his body. I remember there was a time where we used to train Northerners to go out there in the day room and have our weapons cheek between our butt cheeks while we were doing burpees. You know how complicated that is without dropping your piece? To the point we had to ban that practice because, you know, homies were just letting it fall out. And all you hear was ding, 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 ding. Like, we couldn't do that. So instead, we have the individuals that were assigned postes to be right there on guard with weapons within reach while we did our burpee routine. So we look at the flaws in our system and try to assume that other group segments have that same flaws in their ways as well. Because Aztec culture, the tattoos are used by the prison administration and IGI and ISU to validate prison gang members. But around this time when I first got to prison, we were always looking for the Aztec G. We used to always assume that, you know, that was, from what I was told, there was a new creation, just like how Nolan Structure was created for the NF. The Southsiders created the Southside government. They used to use that G and get it tatted on them to identify that they were part of this other organization. I don't think it existed very long. I don't even think it was that big. We would look for certain identification marks belonging to Aztec Cultura that were representations for the SURENOS, meaning that they were actually clicked up. They were M associates. We were looking for primary targets. We just don't want to go after any Southerner or any white for that matter. We're trying to find the most influential members on the yard because through the Art of War by Sun Tzu, you got to cut the head off the snake. So our main objective every day, all day with these daily tier reports and monitoring and standing at the door when Southerners are out program and the whites are out program, we're monitoring anything and everything they do from their workout routines to what cells they go to, what individuals get approached the most, what comes out of their cell, what goes in their cell. That's how we as Northerners had a program on a militant basis, on an everyday basis. You know, so the skinheads were a little bit harder. You know, they had the boots right there on the side of their face to get the big swastikas. We know what they mean. But sometimes we would take matters in our own hands. We would actually go out there in the day room with the sole intentions, like I'm going to approach these 3 cells to see if I see anything, to see if I smell burning plastic coming out the cell. I'll be talking to an individual, asking about his music, what he does every day. Let me check out his drawings. The whole time I'm looking at the bottom of his floor to see if I see any scratch marks. Have they been sharpening weapons? If I'm able to see in his locker and he has like 3 or 4 grease cans and I know he's bald-headed, then I know he's using that for flame. He's using that for fire to melt plastic. Or anything else for that matter. You know, I want to find what individuals are making pruno. because that's a source of income. So while we're over here just trying to mingle and make it seem like we're just trying to get to know one another and extending that level of respect, the whole time we're trying to monitor these individuals and identify who's who. That way, if we ever go to war, we know who to target. We know who to hit first. You could put 30 Southerners in front of me, and I'm going to try to run around and get past them or run through them in order to get to that one individual that they keep in the back. Because as long as I get him off the yard, the rest of the individuals are just going to fall in the sink of, well, what do we do next? What do we do next? You cut the head off the snake, the art of war. That was our primary focus. That was always been our motive. So we do that every day with these daily tier reports. You know, I would monitor their fishing. I'd have homeboys monitor their fishing. You know, what sells fish the most during lockdowns? Sometimes we might even like, hey, just shoot a court. We might just draft up a fake kite and shoot a kite and just whatever it is to them. Say, hey man, can you get this to your homies that's running the yard? And listen, watch it be fished all day. Watch where the porters drop it off. Have alert every homeboy in each section. Hey, pay attention to when I drop this kite off. Where does it go? Let's try to pinpoint what sells or what so we can engage up on them when the doors open. That's just the warfare that and the mind games and the psychological warfare that we play every day in prison. But the strong point I think that Surenos have is that they're always big. And I think they take their dedication to their purpose and their cause and their meaning and the sur and the trece a lot more serious than my homeboys did. Because some of my homies, you know, they did the bare minimum. They didn't like to do all the extracurricular writing, their extracurricular essays, always having to stand around, always having to watch this, sometimes they just wanted to just a program and just be comfortable. But when it went to war, then we went to war. Surenos, I think that's a different culture. I think they take that gang culture a lot more seriously, sad to say. Because look at them. To this day, we're talking about the Mexican Mafia that was created in the 50s. To this day, they're big factors. They're still making people. They're taking over feds. Look at the video I just posted the other day. The dude's on death row controlling the streets of the national city in San Diego just got busted on an organized crime ring. He got busted with $28,000. And I remember talking to a northerner on the SNY like maybe a year or two before I came home. He was programming with the NF on the yard and the Mexican Mafia. And this is the one thing that blew my mind. He was like, bro, sometimes I've seen big homies, you know, ask them for favores, like shoot them a little bit of canteen, a little bit of money, hook them up with some dope. And while they were waiting on their lick, on a hit, he goes, man, them Mexican Mafia fools, they would have like 5 or 6 Surenos carrying their canteen bags to the store. You don't see homeboy. You didn't see the big homies walking them to their cell with big old bags like that, 5 or 6 bags at a time. And I was like, no way. I was like, all this struggle, all this fighting, all this, you know, taking over the streets and all this paying this 1/3 to these individuals' books and they're not well funded. What am I missing? Because I remember shooting a lot of money. And I remember working on the streets with Bubbles and he was in possession of a lot of money. Silver was in possession of a lot of money. Beto Palomino was in possession of a lot of money. At least when I seen it, they had businesses out here. And you're telling me that now there's a bunch of NFers walking on the yard that are old, that just got kicked out of the shoe, and they're all broke, don't really have that much money on their books, still calling their familia for money. I mean, I seen a video the other day. I'm not sure. I think it was Tibbs. He called his girl, and it was a wiretap. I think I seen it on Paradigm Media News, and he was asking his girl for $20. For $20. I would hope it was 20,000. That's what he really meant, but come on, you big organization now, organized crime organization that they should be being well funded. But that's the Sureño strong point that I always wanted to point out. Each car, each Ramfla, Orange County, the IE car, Los Angeles, San Diego, they always had multiple hitters flooding them yards with drugs. So even when I was programming as a northerner, they'd probably be like 2 or 3 of us out of 50, and us 3 were trying to make money on the yard and split 1/3 for the house. The other 2/3, 1/3 for ourselves. The other one's for the homies in the back, bro. So it was hard to make money in an environment where the Surenos pretty much took over the drug game. That's what it felt like on the yards that I was on with these individuals most of the time. Things could be different. The level 3s like Soledad, Sedlano, you know, I heard a lot of homies were out there just flooding the gates. But that was open season. Sureños were making money just as Norteños were. But that's some of the strong point I always see is that Sureños had the power in numbers. Some people don't like to believe in it. Some people are like, man, somos pocos pero locos. We're few, but we got heart. We're proud. We'll fight. Sometimes, you know, Quality is better over quantity, but sometimes quantity does help. It does make a big difference. You can't win that many battles with 10 or 15 individuals going at 130 people, 200 people every time. Because our 10 to 15 are going to be transferred out. Then we're going to reduce our numbers. Their numbers are always going to remain big. That's, I think, the Sureno faction's strongest point is the power in numbers. They actually know how to apply the concept of power in numbers. Same thing for the skinheads, but the skinheads ain't always been that deep, or the Peckerwoods and the Peni's and, you know, the USAS. They're always going to be factored in, but their numbers ain't never going to be as big as the Sureno faction. That's why we monitor the Surenos the most, because that was our biggest opposition. Then you got to also remember, like I told you before in this video, Surenos, oftentimes, like on the level 4s, 180s, where I did most of my prison term, a lot of them individuals got life. A lot of them individuals are in there for murder or attempted murder, so they're doing 15, 20, 30 plus years. The thing about them is Northerners don't green like cops. These guys got the capability and the padrinos, the elders that don't give two goddams about a police. They would green light a cop. We weren't willing to do that. Why? Because they're like, man, we'll go to war with anybody. Just like Wedo Sherm said, we'll go to, and any cop can get it too. Who said cops are off limits? That's their strong point. They got individuals who ain't got nothing to lose that are willing to do it for the Sur, for the Trece, for the Black Hand, and they'll book anybody. So you have to realize you're around a bunch of Surenos that have life. You better assume they got bangers. Because I've seen them. I've seen the damage they could do. We're talking about 30 hit policies. You're talking about they're sending Surenos stabbing a dude multiple times while they're getting hit with batons and cops, and they're getting sprayed and they're getting shot, and they're still crawling and jumping on top of that fool and stabbing him as much as they can because they're trying to take this man's air. That's the environment that I had to live in. That's how brutal it was. That's their strong points. The only weak points I can point out is, you know, they do love their drugs. And that's sometimes we can utilize that to an advantage, but any man can utilize anybody when they're in that disadvantage, when they're just feeding their arm. They're feeding their habit. That's any man's weak point. So I can't just say it's always for Surenos because I didn't see a lot of drug use within my homies. If they were doing it behind closed doors after bar lock. When the door wasn't going to open, they hid that shit. But Southerners, they love chasing the dragon. They love their opiates. So, you know, that could always be a weak point if we were big enough to say, you know what, we're going to bring in a quarter pound and feed them and get them all high and strung out and weak. So when we go to yard, we can go to war. Yeah, it's the art of war. But that's the only weak point I can actually point out to you is that they just love drugs. But I can't even say that's a strong weak point to even point out to begin with, because they still got power in numbers. They still got individuals that already threw their life away, willing to throw the rest of what they have left away on behalf of the Sud. And that's what makes the fight even that much more harder nowadays. The last thing I'm going to point out, when I was in last senior level 3, I was working in the wood shop. And I have a lot of stories that I'm going to drop on my YouTube videos about the wood shop. And while we go in the wood shop, we were back there with the whites, the Southerners, the blacks, the Usos, the Asians, everybody. There was like 3 Northerners, but there was like 5 or 7 Surenos, about 4 whites. In the wood shop, we got access to some lethal weapons. And I'm talking about sharp screwdrivers, drills, anything, ice picks, because we're working around wood, nails. So every day we'd all walk in with one intention. We check out the same weapons were being divided, and they weren't even being used. We're talking about handles with ice picks about this long that were like considered screwdrivers. Me and the homie would check it, put it in our little area, because, you know, the wood shop, we divided the area. There was Southerners and the whites would be in the back. We'd be in the front with the Southerners, and the Surenos would be in the back. Us and the blacks would be in the front. And we'd have these particular weapons right there, and just sitting right there. They'd have theirs sitting right there too, or hidden in their little drawers. We never even used them. They weren't even used for nothing. We were too busy learning the saw blades and cutting wood. But every day we will go in there, and that was the first thing we checked out. Even the teacher would trip out that they wouldn't check out the weapons that we'd have. They'd always check out the ones that they wanted to get a hold of, like the skinheads would always get like the big crowbars. Surenos would check out the certain knives. We check out the certain knives, and we'd keep them there every day, so as long as I worked there. Because if it ever kicked off on the yard, we got access to the weapons. We can just go up right there. So imagine what that's like, living like that every day. So I always trip out. I would sit there and just stare at the Southerners, and they had them weapons within reach. We had ours within reach. That's a cold way to live, because it's like we had to think in the back of your head. If it kicks off on that yard right now and the word comes back before we get out there, hey, man, the Northern Descendants just went up right now on the yard. We're not going to ask questions. We're just going to reach for these deadly weapons. These ain't weapons that we're making out of a baby powder bottle or melting the tip with a box cutter on the front. No, we're talking about real weapons, real screwdrivers that were sharpened to a tip, to a point. Crowbars, metal flats, poles, drill bits like this long that people just filed down and just made a sharp point in and hit them somewhere in the wood shop area just in case we needed them. Do you know how much of a deadly fight that would be? How brutal and barbaric that would be for us to go up within that wood shop? But it was like that every day for like the whole time I was there until the riot kicked off with the blacks. But I got more stories about that and like the stuff I used to sneak out from there later on for another video. So that alone should tell you just a little bit, a small glimpse of the psychological warfare that you're going to have to deal with in jail. It ain't about programming and learning and developing education or gaining an education from like your GED diploma. Yeah, those classes are available. But the real education is going to come from survival, of just being on your toes, of knowing when every time you wake up every day that you're at some point you're going to fight for your life. And I think those circumstances taught me now that I'm out here is that I need to learn to appreciate life, because I almost lost my life in there plenty of times. And I could lose it just as easy out here in many ways for putting myself in some predicaments that I don't need to be in. So think about that for the youth. Imagine just being there every day, tense, alert, having to anticipate whether or not you might just go to war any second, any moment, any minute, for any reason. And having these lethal and brutal instruments available right there for you. Even though you feel like you have enough fight in you, enough quota to fight, sometimes you're not always going to win every fight. There's battles that sometimes you're never going to win. But you're going to have to sit there and fight for your life just because you want to breathe to see another day. That's the level of violence that exists in jail. You know, I used to hate looking at that screwdriver like, man, I would hate for somebody to stab me with this. I'm not going to make it after the third or fourth puncture. Once I get penetrated 4 or 5 times, I'm going to collapse. That's all it's going to take. And there's going to be men on that yard you're going to meet that are willing to take your air for what they believe in. So you got to ask yourself, is what you believe in is worth dying for? Because you will, if you do go down this path, you will be placed in that predicament like, hey, man, it's a life or death situation. You're going to fight as much as you can, but it's win-lose. And that's the part that sucks, man, is that we're killing each other. We're killing our own kind. But I'd rather see you not in that predicament than place yourself in that predicament and have to fight for your life like I did and be left with these kind of scars that you got to look at every day as a reminder. Like you could have lost your life. So with that being said, man, I hope you guys like my story. That was the best I could provide for this in regards to this question. You know, tell me what you guys think. Tell me what it was like for you guys if you guys been in my predicament. The psychological warfare. I want to hear about the psychological warfare that you guys had to go through if you guys done prison time. With that being said, like I always say, it's one life, one chance. We only got one chance to do this right. Let's get it done. Peace.